All right, Beyond fans. Before we begin the show, I wanted to first ask you to just think about something for a minute. Have you enjoyed our guest list of interviews so far? Batman Beyond voice actor Melissa Disney, for one? Or how about DC Comics legend Dan Jurgens? Since I'm assuming the answer is yes, then I wanted to let you know about the Patreon we've set up for the podcast. I know what you're thinking. Oh man, you're going to ask for money? No, I'm not. But I am going to tell you where you can go if you'd like to help us continue to bring you all the great guests you were just thinking about. For free, by the way. Please also consider the freeness in this little mind experiment. Just go to patreon.com/BatmanBeyondPodcast. That's where you can see our first very modest financial goal, which will help us to continue not only to get great guest interviews, but also drive to places like New York City for New York Comic Con. All the expenses that go along with convention coverage in general, which we're going to continue doing nearly monthly. We also want to step up the sound quality a bit, and a few more goals that you can check out on our Patreon. It's actually pretty incredible seeing all the money I've already spent on the show laid out and itemized on the Patreon. But one thing to always keep in mind, whatever you can do in terms of donation, $1, whatever, is more than appreciated and helpful. So once again, please go to patreon.com/BatmanBeyondPodcast and help us to continue to go above and Batman beyond. Welcome, Neo-Gothamites, to episode 12 of Above and Batman Beyond, a pretty shway podcast devoted entirely to the futuristic Bat Beyond. For episode 12, we have part 2 of my interview with Adam Beechen, TV and comics writer, here to talk about his Batman Beyond Industrial Revolution comic over at DC. Above and Batman Beyond is a production of Comic Book International. That's comicbookintl.com. Check out Comic Book International for all the latest in geek news. Find new episodes of Above and Batman Beyond on iTunes, SoundCloud, and BatmanBeyondPodcast.com. Hit us up on Facebook and Instagram at Batman Beyond Podcast and Twitter at Batman Beyond POD. Theme music by Exsanguinator and podcast art by Courtney Delenn Slater. Thank you for listening to Above and Batman Beyond. Happy 2018, Neo-Gothamites, from Above and Batman Beyond, a pretty shway podcast devoted entirely to the futuristic iteration of Batman Beyond. My name is Benjamin David, your Beyond host and managing editor here at comicbookintl.com. For a show about a bat of the future, saying Happy 2018 sounds eerily close to the futuristic years of the 21st century I grew up on. As an 80s, 90s kid, hearing any decade preceded by 20 was to hear something from a sci-fi movie or something predicting something about the future. And yet here we are, 2018. The first show of the new futuristic year brings us part 2 of Adam Beechen. My interview with the TV and comics writer was this past summer, last year, believe it or not. If you haven't heard part 1 of this interview with Beechen, you can find it back on episode 2 of Above and Batman Beyond. Adam Beechen was with us right at the beginning, only the second ever episode of our podcast. Listening back, it does feel like a while ago. It's 10 episodes. A lot of fascinating stuff from Beechen in part 1, so definitely be sure to check it out if you haven't heard it already. Part 2 of my interview with Beechen is, for me personally, the best part of our conversation. Again, a lot of fascinating Beyond stuff in part 1, but part 2, we talk about my favorite part of the Industrial Revolution book he wrote, a single-shot comic within the Industrial run called Legends of the Dark Knight, Inc. Beechen brilliantly brought back the classic Batman anthology comics called Legends of the Dark Knight, writing new stories into the future of Batman Beyond. Other Legends stories, for example, will be Legends of the Dark Knight Max, for the Max Gibson character in Beyond. These are focused stories about one particular character from the Bat universe, not just stories that revolve around Batman alone. As you'll hear me say in today's interview, Beechen's legend for the Beyond villain Inc. is hands down one of the best origin stories I've ever seen or read anywhere. In 22 pages, Adam Beechen is somehow able to throw you right into a fun, futuristic adventure, but also do it from a dark and meaningful place. This is the origin of a villain. As every well-written Batman villain should be, we as the reader completely understand and sympathize for the grounded humanity of our bad guy. This Inc. story is no exception. What's unique about the Legends of the Dark Knight anthology of it all is that you can get an entire character study of someone who would otherwise only get a certain amount of page time or screen time. A main point of storytelling is expressing motivation. If a main character doesn't have clear motivation, you got a pretty big weakness there in your story. By the end of the Legends of the Dark Knight Inc., you not only buy Inc.'s motivation, you're actually rooting for the woman at the end. Finally, if you're a fan of DC Collectibles, Diamond Select Toys, and Beyond/Batman the Animated Series, then stay tuned for our upcoming collectibles unboxings here at Above and Batman Beyond. We have 2 new unboxings coming from our Above and Batman Beyond YouTube channel. Just search for Comic Book INTL on YouTube and subscribe to our CBI channel. For our first unboxing, thanks to Zach Oat, who I interviewed for our last 2 episodes. Thanks to Zach and the great folks at Diamond Select, we have yet another resin bat bust from Diamond. This one is from regular old Gotham, Batman the Animated Series Gotham, that is. Diamond's prestigious BTAS line, we have a bust from one of the most revered, let alone Emmy Award-winning episodes of Batman the Animated Series, Heart of Ice. Nora. Oh yeah, no better collectibles honor can be paid to the animated series than a Diamond Select Mr. Freeze bust unboxing. It'll also be fitting for the Sub-Zero blizzard that is the Jersey Shore here at Above and Batman Beyond. After the Freeze from Diamond, we also got a Harley from DC Collectibles coming too. Beyond thanks to DC Comics in-house collectibles company for sending us the much talked about Harley's Holiday statue. I saw this baby firsthand at New York Toy Fair 2017, almost a year ago at this point, can't believe it, before it came out, and my God, I was blown away. Everybody was. I can't believe how far we've come in less than a year that DC Collectibles wants me to talk about something that I worshipped at Toy Fair like a religious icon. This statue is so unique because it's not only from a single classic Harley episode of Batman the Animated Series titled Harley's Holiday. It's actually from the title card of that episode. You know, those super stylized, oftentimes full painting, old school 1940s film title cards from the show. So damn classy. While it may sound like a Christmas statue, holiday just refers to a much different Harley version of the word. While the holidays for us might be over, it's never too late to come celebrate and unbox Harley's Holiday with us. How was that? Not bad, right? So without further ado, here is my Beyond Skype interview with Adam Beechen, TV and comics writer, here to talk about his Batman Beyond Industrial Revolution book over at DC.
This is Adam Beechen telling you to go above and Batman Beyond.
So this is something I wrote about how this story impacted me. I also, just as a bit of a backstory, like reading it. I mean, anytime you read something or watch a movie, or I even heard Anthony Bourdain talk about, I think it was Bourdain, talk about eating and having a meal. And a lot of it, when you remember the food that you eat, it's the experience around it.
Yeah.
And that's what's so important about, even if it's a hole-in-the-wall restaurant, you know, the hole in the wall might be what you remember way more than the actual food that you swear it's the food that you remember, but is it the food? And it's similarly with this issue. You know, we were saying how much fun the research is that you and I have to do. Me, for this show, I recently took it upon myself. I'm like, you know what? I guess I just have to watch every episode of Batman Beyond because I have a podcast about it. This is rough. And you were saying when you learn the property yourself, you watched a bunch of it, and that was awesome on the DVDs. So with reading this, I had read Industrial Revolution proper. I'd finished the Justice League story, which, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but was Inc. were these Legends of the Dark Knight stories intended to be put in the trade paperback, or did it just happen to make its way into the one that I had?
No, I think that all stories are intended for collection these days. I think that it doesn't, they don't tend to leave out issues because fans are completists and they want to
No,
read.
but I mean, like when you wrote
everything.
Legends of the Dark Knight Inc., were you like, I want this to be put into industrial?
Yeah, I mean, it was planned for
Okay.
that place in the overall larger story because
Okay.
it has some elements that lead into things that happen down the line, for sure.
Okay, I wasn't sure about that,
Okay.
but either way, it's like I finished the bigger story within it, which is the Justice League story, and it was fantastic. And then it was kind of like, should I go to bed? Because I know this Inc. story is a one-shot. And I don't want to say it was an afterthought, but it was just more like, all right, I can read it now or I can read it tomorrow. And I've already read most of the book. I've already done most of my homework. And good God, like just delving into that book that night and being like, no, let's read it now. I was never happier about being ambitious about getting homework done in my life.
Oh, good.
Good God. So this is something I wrote about it. Again, this story was the highlight of Industrial Revolution for me. Just make sure before reading it, you have a box of tissues and a writer's notebook to take notes. In a single issue of comics, you made me care more about the character of Ink than I ever had in my nearly 20 years of knowing her. I always liked Ink, but I never loved Ink until now. Not only did you guys give us an origin story, you gave this woman a soul, a purpose, a mission that I personally will continue rooting for, even though she is a murderous criminal. Anti-hero writing at its best. Unbelievably touching and powerful work, my friend.
Well, thank you. That's really nice to hear. I mean, you know, every writer wants to hear that kind of stuff from a reader. So thanks. That means a lot. I appreciate it.
No worries. Thank you. So you'll obviously tell it much better than I, but could you just give us a brief summary of Legends of the Dark Knight, Inc.?
Well, the idea was to spotlight the character of Ink, who is a shape-shifting villain. She's a fan favorite character that we didn't have really a place for in the stories we had told to that point, but we knew that fans wanted to see her, and I wanted to explore that character more. So we did this single issue to sort of flesh her out a little bit. One of the things that had been established in the TV series was that she had a daughter, and there was a tricky relationship there. And I thought that was a good way to delve into who Ink was as a person. My favorite villains don't think of themselves as villains. They're always the heroes of their own stories. And so I got to thinking about why was she doing what she does, what made her decide to take on the life that she did, and centering that a little bit around her history and the daughter that she had made a lot of sense to me and provided her with some relatable motivations, hopefully for our readers, and made you sort of approach her in a different light. She's still the same character. She still has no compunctions about killing and about doing what she's been hired to do. But now you know why she does it in the first place.
Because it's also a story about a parent, completely.
Totally. And it makes you understand her a little better, I hope. And the story would not be nearly as effective without Chris Batista's art. He does such an amazing job of capturing the fluidity of Ink, pun intended.
Right.
The way she moves, the facial reactions of the characters.
But in all seriousness, he agreed. Really good job.
It's unbelievable. The mood and everything that he manages to convey in that book are really, really terrific.
Yeah, you too. I mean, talk about collaboration. Wow.
Oh, thanks. We had actually collaborated once before on an issue of Teen Titans in the mainstream DC universe. So I was aware at least a little bit of what I think are Chris's strengths, and was able to write to those a little bit just from having had the experience of working with him once before. So it was a pleasure to work with him again.
Oh, cool. Right. You had already had a bit of that. Short note, if you will.
Yeah.
I know he was shorthand.
Yeah. I know he was a little bummed that he didn't get to draw Batman more in the issue and didn't get to draw Terry and Dana. But hopefully he enjoyed it as much as he was able with the story we told.
Oh, that's kind of funny. He's like, what about Batman?
Yeah.
Now, let me ask you something. That was actually, I didn't even write this as a question, but is Batman at least in like a shot of that story?
I haven't read it in a little while. I don't remember.
Because I would love if he was just not in it at all. I think some of the best Batman stories, because any good Batman story is so much richer if it can exist with Batman being in like one part. Like, it doesn't have to be about Batman. I love that.
Right, especially if the book is meant to be a legend anyway. But I think we probably have Batman at least somewhat in that story fighting Inc. or fighting the guys that she's dealing with.
Yeah, he's in like a couple pages. I'm looking through it now, but that's about it. I love it. Oh,
yeah, and we do that because it's just not a good idea to have a comic called Batman and not have your hero show up at all.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, you got to have him.
You go back to Denny's idea of giving the reader what they pay for, and they're paying for the name on the cover. So.
Well, but then you can watch some of these movies, and then it takes 40 minutes for him to put on the suit. So I don't know. Maybe they're not all following the rules there. Good God.
Maybe not. Yeah, you're right.
Not to say that those are good.
Well, sometimes they are. It can be effective that way, but sometimes you're right. Sometimes you want to just get right into it.
Do you have? I just kind of want to gauge time before I start talking about other stuff.
Sure.
I typically like to, not ask more of an hour from you. So do you want to, we'll just talk a little bit more about Ink and then wrap up. Is that okay?
I'm good with whatever you want to do. I really don't have a lot of plans today. Like I said, we're working on our house. So I'm hanging out here watching the dogs and listening to jackhammers.
Well, I love it. All right. Well, let's talk some more then.
Okay. Sure.
This was something that made me think, actually, before we move on from this was something that you confirmed the other day, but the listeners haven't heard it. You completely came up. There had never been a fleshed out origin for Ink prior to this story you wrote, correct?
Not that I'm aware of. I know that they had done a Batman Beyond comic book a number of years before we started ours, and I'm not sure if they explored that in that book, but I didn't get any resistance to telling the story this way when I proposed it. So I'm guessing that an origin wasn't done.
If they ever move on with this character and don't use your origin, they're going to hear it from me.
Okay.
This is now Ink. And the reason I asked that especially was because it is such, it's just such a good origin, and it deals with some serious stuff too. So as we were talking about with kind of grounding it in reality, this is something I don't even know if you could probably pull off necessarily in an animated series, like a cartoon for kids, the human trafficking end of it, right?
Right. Yeah.
But who cares? Like, oh God, dude.
Yeah, it got pretty dark. As my memory goes, and I could be wrong about this, I think I was watching The Wire at around the time I was writing these stories. And
I knew it. I saw those containers. I'm like, this guy has got. I worship The Wire. Sorry to interrupt, but I knew it when I saw that one panel.
Me too. I worship it as well, and I may have drawn on that if I was really watching those at about the same time. It seems like it would have been about the same time. So it seemed like a pretty fertile ground to start from for her.
Yeah. So for listeners who haven't read this story, can you get into a little bit what we're talking about when it comes to human trafficking with Ink?
Well, the as I recall, and again, it's been a while since I've read the story. She was from a foreign country trying to get to America, hitched a ride on the wrong boat essentially, and wound up coming to America and being sold into medical research, really, and was experimented upon, and that's how she got her powers. So we start the story from the point of view of a young girl who is just trying to make a better life for herself, who winds up in this horrible, horrible circumstance. And as her powers develop, finds a way to make it work to her benefit, to establish a kind of life in the United States. So it was a pretty dark story. That's a dark character to begin with. There's not a lot of comedy involved. But we wanted to tell that kind of a story for that particular issue. So it all adds to hopefully giving you a better understanding of who she is and why she does the things she does.
Adding to how powerful it is, you say it's dark, and it definitely, looking back, I'm like, wow, that story is intensely dark. However, the way that you guys write it and the way that you sorry, the way that you wrote it and the way both of you put it together, where it's completely interlaced of excitement and the darkness and a current storyline of something happening, but also this is who I am and this is where I come from, without making it confusing. Like there's not enough of this, I think, in media, especially with superhero stories. So what I'm saying is that, like, you can tell an origin story while also keeping it exciting and keeping it fun and keeping the action going. And you guys met that formula to a T. I loved it so much.
Thank you. You have ambitions when you start a story, and you hope that they're met. And sometimes it comes together, and sometimes it doesn't as well as you would hope. And that one is one that I think we're both pretty proud of, because it really came together the way that we had it in mind.
But the fact that you had that in mind, like, that's where I'm not trying to, like, point out the negative too much here, but again, there's a lot of darkness here, and these characters can get dark, and so many times with these movies and with comics and with a lot of even the video games, it's like, can we relax with the darkness? Like, you at least have to. I don't think they give you enough of kind of both, and I left this story feeling, yes, definitely it was dark. Definitely there's a little bit of some, depressing sadness and stuff. It's very sad, but at the same time, it's powerfully sad and it's action packed. And, like, the second to last panel is still her, inking her way up a building. And it's just cool looking and fun and adventurous. So good.
Well, thank you. That goes back to what Denny O'Neil said, right? You try to pack as much into those pages as you can, to give readers a full experience.
Now, if you don't mind me asking, do you come from an immigrant family yourself? Because this is very much an immigrant story.
No, I am not a child of immigrant parents. My grandparents were immigrants, but I don't have a lot of experience with that personally. No,
I don't either. I was an Italian teacher for a few years, so I kind of have experience with that community of a lot of, in New Jersey, a lot of sometimes first generation Italians and things like that. And it is multicultural here, but I personally don't have that experience either. I just think that this is a very powerful immigrant story, and not to get political or anything, and I really don't want to get that way at all on the show, but it still must feel good to have an immigrant story this powerful under your belt, kind of especially during a time when it is a bigger issue than ever. And not, again, to get political, just in America, this is a time of globalization, and talk about a show that is about the future. The show was created going on 20 years ago, and I literally just got chills thinking about it, but we're entering that, and at least temporally, in their story. Their story is 50 years from now, and that was 20 years ago. So we're halfway there, and globalization's a very real thing. And if you think about the future, you have to think about population increase. You have to think about that, the struggles that these people are having all over the world. Talk about Italy. I mean, Italy is facing worse immigration problems than we have right now in some places. So it's a worldwide thing. It's a human thing. It's a human story, and it's not going away.
Well, that's true. I think we were after the story of a person who just wants a better life and gets something different than I think she expected. And that's a pretty common immigrant kind of story. There have been great immigrant stories that have been told throughout history. The Godfather is one of the great ones.
God, that is such a good point. You expect one thing and you're totally getting something different. Wow.
Yeah, I don't know that we were trying necessarily to be political with the story.
No,
we were just trying to be individual. And one of the things, you make a good point about the multiculturalism of Batman Beyond, which is that so many of the characters come from really different kinds of backgrounds.
Good point.
Terry obviously is a Caucasian male, but Dana isn't. Max isn't. there
And
are
she's a
lots of
female.
different. Yeah, well, right, exactly. There are lots of different character backgrounds and family stories to be told among those characters, and we tried to do some of that because I think those are interesting. And those kinds of stories are perfect for something like the single issues that we did during the course of Batman Beyond.
Wow, listen to that. Yeah, you hit a lot of heavy marks: human trafficking, immigration, even class struggle, like we said before, globalization, drugs.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, and there was even some noir stuff in there. Like, oh god, I mean, it's so good. Just if you want to, one of the best, seriously, the best comic origins I've really ever taken, and I've taken in a good amount. I'm not a comic book expert. I don't come from that world, but still, like, I've seen a lot of these origins in a lot of different forms and media, and so well done.
Well, thank you. That's really nice to hear. It's really gratifying.
Yeah.
And I hope you'll read the rest of the series, because I'll be interested to hear what you think of the other kinds of stories that we try to tell, and some of the characters that we bring back or bring in. And
so when you say the rest of the series, the Legends of the Dark Knight series you're talking about?
No, the whole Batman Beyond series that we wrote.
Oh, God. Yeah, I have a lot of your stuff to still read. Yeah.
Yeah, beginning with Hush Beyond and ending with the last bunch of issues we did that, excuse me, that Adam Archer drew. So,
there's a lot of great takeaways from the story that we mentioned before. One of them definitely being everyone has a story.
Right.
You know, like, immigration aside, this is something that a friend of mine told me recently, and I had a problem, and I don't want to get too personal, but the long and the short of it was I had a huge problem with someone in her life because of their background, and her thing was, like, this is something that you're not getting. Like, everyone has a story. And no matter what is going on with this person, like, there is a reason for it. And it's so true. Like, it's just a simple, and even, you could even break it down scientifically. It's a cause and effect thing. And it's like, if there is a thing called cause and effect, and you have these highly complex things called humans in the middle of it, that's what's called drama. You know, things are going to happen to people, and their reactions are what are stories. How
Exactly.
people deal with things are the story, and everyone has one. So kind of, what do you think? That's, I mean, definitely a takeaway from me, but what do you think is kind of the most important takeaway from this Inc. story?
Just that, I think what you just said, which is that to Terry, Inc. is one thing on the surface. She's an evil force that needs to be stopped, who has bad intentions, who can't be allowed to achieve her goals. But to Inc., she's much, much more than that. She's a mother. She's somebody's kid. She's the person who's had all of these experiences. And I wanted to show that. I don't think that, I don't like two-dimensional villains or two-dimensional characters, and try to make the characters as well-rounded as you can in the limited amount of space that you have. Like,
especially in Batman, your standard for doing that in Batman's always higher.
Well, yeah. I mean, Batman is such a well-drawn character, and the world of the Batman has been so explored and picked through, and all of the characters' motivations and histories are so laid out that you want all the characters that you bring into a story to meet that same level of characterization. So,
I think that is insight to any Batman, or to any comic book. The thing you just said about to Batman Inc. is this, or to Inc. Batman is that. And the reason I don't even fill it in is because you could use that formula for any hero villain. And that is such a simple, important thing that I kind of never broke down myself, is that really it's the thing in it's the moment in The Fugitive, where it's the most powerful part, where Tommy Lee Jones, where Harrison Ford goes, I didn't kill my wife, and in the tunnel, and he just goes, I don't care. Right. He's got the gun to him, and it's right before he jumps out of the tunnel, and his whole thing is just like, look, I have a job to do.
Right.
And it is to catch your ass. You are the fugitive.
Exactly. Exactly.
But once he starts to learn about it, oh man, you just gave me goosebumps.
Well, the simple way of putting it is that to Brainiac, Lex Luthor is one thing. To Lex Luthor's mother, Lex is completely different.
Oh God!
And so you try and keep those kinds of perspectives in mind when you're telling those kinds of character stories, and that fascinates me. I mean, you don't think about it, but Lex Luthor is somebody's kid, right?
Totally.
And probably to her, he can do no wrong.
You just saying those words, Lex Luthor's mom, just gave me the chills.
I'm sure somebody's probably told that story in the long history of Superman, but the point is the same, which is that not everybody is a villain or a hero to everybody else.
Absolutely. Yeah, they have their own motivations. They have, again, everybody has a story. So good.
Right. And a perspective.
Now, the ending.
Mm-hmm.
More ink in the future, because we're going to spoilers this for people. If you don't want to hear the very, very end of the ink story, spoilers 3, 2, 1. The daughter is now infected with the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
Is
Correct.
this a hint possible to more ink in the future? Baby ink?
Well, I'm not working on the book anymore, so I can't say. But certainly my intention was to set up as much stuff for possible stories in the future as I could. And I certainly liked Ink and wanted to see her again in the book. So that's something that, whoever takes over the character or is working on the character at a given time, if they want to play with it, they can. If they want to do something completely different, they certainly can. But it's there for them. It was me just laying breadcrumbs for possible future stories if I wanted to get back around to it.
You just got to keep knocking it out of the park all the way to the end, don't you?
I don't know about that, but just trying to, when you're a writer, you want to have as many places to go for possible stories as you can, because comics, it's a machine. You've got to crank out stories every month, and you don't want to repeat yourself, and you want to give yourself interesting places to write to. So that was just me trying to set stuff up, whether it was for me or for whoever else that came after and wanted to maybe take a shot at it.
Oh, listen to how interesting that is. So, right. So almost the production aspect of kind of what a comic is and what you need to do to perpetuate it. What's up, Beyond fans? You're going to hear me say this in the show for the next couple months. We're taking a survey of our listeners, and we'd like you to participate. It will help us learn more about you, no matter how long you've been a listener or how frequently you listen to this show. So please take a few minutes and visit our website at batmanbeyondpodcast.com. That's Batmanbeyond, PODCAST.com. You'll find the listener survey link right on the homepage, and you can complete the survey anonymously. Thanks. It's almost that thing, limitation breeds creativity almost.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I don't know if you remember
within these rules, but within these rules, I have to create more for more characters. Sorry, what were you saying?
No, it's okay. I don't know if you remember in Industrial Revolution, there is a guy who is behind the unrest at Wayne Incorporated or Wayne Tech. I can't remember what the company was called, but there was a guy that Bruce has a conversation with at the very end, and he says
Wayne
to
Powers,
the guy,
I think.
No, it was a guy named Godfrey, I think.
Okay.
Sort of an anti-union guy. And Bruce has a conversation with him at the end of the storyline where he says, you can tell your masters I know who they are, and they're not going to, mess with my city, basically. And that Godfrey character is a nod to one of Jack Kirby's characters from the 1960s and 70s, who was a minion of Darkseid. And so what I was trying to do was to set up the possibility of maybe bringing in Darkseid into the Batman Beyond universe somewhere down the line. Never really got that far, but it seemed like it was a possibility because the Justice League of that era has Big Barda on the team, and Big Barda is part of Kirby's Darkseid universe. And it opened up a lot of possibilities for crossovers and a really big story that we could tell at some point. We didn't get there, but again, that is out there in case anybody wants to try and build on it.
Oh, that is so cool. So talking about Industrial Revolution itself in terms of the Justice League story, we never really got to see much of this futuristic team up during the cartoon. It was only a few episodes. Considering how little material of them there is out there, I'm sure it's fun to have characters that haven't done it all and have been around the block a million times. Many comic book characters are on their way to 100 years old. So as a writer, I'm sure it can get frustrating trying to make sure you're not making Batman do something he's already done before.
Right, or doing something that he wouldn't do.
Nice.
The fun part
too.
of working with the Justice League in that case was you have to remember that it's a Batman book, and these guys are guest stars, so the story is not really about them. It's about how Batman relates to them. And what was fun was having Bruce figure out exactly how to defeat the Justice League using Batman as his tool to do so. So he's feeding instructions.
It totally was. I loved that. God.
He's feeding instructions to Batman through his earpiece the entire time, saying, okay, punch him, knock him over here, and, upend her over here. This one's going to be tough, but do this. And it just seemed like a very Bruce thing to do, to be able to do that. And it was really fun because you've got this guy who has no powers, but essentially a pretty cool suit. Take out a Green Lantern, take out Big Barda, take out a guy who's 25 feet tall. It was really fun. It was really fun to write. That was some of my favorite stuff to write in the series, was how Bruce talks to Terry.
Yeah, Bruce in the Beyond universe is a fascinating character.
Agreed. I really agree. He's my favorite one to write.
Yeah?
Yeah, he really was.
I was going to ask, what's it like to write? Because you're still writing Batman. It's still Batman, but it is still very different. So what's that like?
It's fascinating. It really is. It's just fun to sit and think about Bruce Wayne. And when I was writing Robin, and when I was writing Batgirl, and various other times when the Bat universe came into what I was working on, I was always fascinated by the idea of Batman the father, because he has adopted, whether legally or not, a number of younger proteges over the years. Yeah. So there must be some kind of paternal instinct to him, and some level of caring he has for these kids, because they remind him of him in some way. So it was always fun to balance that caring with the gruff taskmaster kind of attitude he always seems to have. And find a way to bring that through, because he's very reluctant to show that kind of emotion.
Totally.
So
he's the last guy to give you a hug or be affectionate or
right. And so I was always trying to play with that balance, and that was so much fun. Plus, he's just such a smart character, and always has great lines in the show. Always. So to give him really good
character,
and to give him really good, snappy, fun lines was just a real pleasure to do.
Yeah, because Bruce, that's a good point. The fun, snappy lines, going back to the darkness thing before, and probably the limitation breeds creativity thing as well. Batman Beyond, as a, I guess, kind of, to go on a tangent for a minute, Batman Beyond, in and of itself, was created out of limitation breeds creativity. The show was created because they wanted a teenage Batman, and they didn't care what it looked like, just make it happen. And all of Batman the Animated Series was about to leave, and they were like, no, everybody loves the show, we love making it, why the heck do we want to change anything? But then they ended up, kind of their compromise was putting him in the future, and you still get Bruce Wayne in the whole universe. So obviously everything turned out fine. I wouldn't have a podcast about it. We wouldn't be here if it wasn't great. But at the same time, it's like, I feel like kids programming has done so much for keeping in check, maybe, and if not keeping in check, just kind of giving an example of, we can write for adults almost, and even just not talk down to kids while making a kid-friendly story. Right. And I just think it's so important to do. And I
Well,
think
sure.
Bruce really, like, he's someone who can get really dark, but being funny. And I guess my point there was, I was like, wait, where was I going with that? Bruce being funny is something I don't know that would have like necessarily come out so much if they didn't do that on, like, I feel like if there was like a Batman Beyond just comic, might be too dark and he wouldn't be so funny. He'd be more bitter, but he says some funny, quippy stuff and I love it.
Yeah, I think it's tempting to make Bruce just this perpetually brooding, dark hermit who doesn't want anything to do with the outside world. But I think from my perspective, when he brings Terry in, it gives him a little bit of new life. He's able to continue his mission in a way that he can't physically. But he sees Terry's enthusiasm and energy and excitement, and I think it revitalizes him a little bit and brings up his spirit a little bit. So you try and play that without getting rid of Bruce the tactician, Bruce the world's greatest detective, Bruce the thinking machine, you know?
Right, Bruce more the that paternal figure mixed in with the rest. So fascinating.
Yeah, I mean, this is a character who's obsessed, and he's been obsessed with his mission since he was 6 years old or whatever it was. And so he's got a chance to continue that mission now, where he may have thought that his life was over. He didn't have that opportunity anymore. That's got to bring him a certain level of excitement and satisfaction, and also I think a certain amount of joy. He's living vicariously through Terry.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. This is something I wrote. I adored the scene when Batman. So this is going back to the Justice League story within Industrial Revolution. And it's pretty much, I'm kind of reiterating some of the things we just talked about, but I adored the scene when Batman takes on the entire Justice League and when Bruce is walking him through it, like you were just saying. Really honors the tradition of Batman's contingency plans for all the members of the Justice League. This is what cracks me up.
Yes.
Right? And this is what cracks me up when Batman v Superman came out and people kept asking, but why would Batman ever fight Superman? Or there's no way Batman could ever beat Superman. And, say what you will about that movie, but it's just obvious that those people don't know the character of Batman intimately. He is a genius and he doesn't play well with others. And he's always prepared for the worst. And then that combo in a character will lead to plenty of fighting and plenty of winning as well.
Sure. Yeah. It only makes sense. Batman is the guy who tries to think 5 steps ahead, and 5 steps ahead in a good way, 5 steps ahead in a bad way. They're all different ways those steps can go. And he's going to try and have as many of those ways planned out as possible. So it always made sense to me that if Terry was working with the Justice League, he would have plans for how Terry could stop the Justice League if he needed to, the same way that Bruce had that with his own Justice League. My favorite part of that issue is when Bruce says, all right, this is going to be fun. Basically, he cracks his knuckles and says, here's how you're going to deal with the Justice League. Punch out the kid with the weapon that can take out the universe first. And so he just sends him right after the Green Lantern and knocks him cold.
And then the next page is a full page panel that goes, and hit him hard.
Right, exactly. And then halfway through the fight, the kid starts waking up, and Bruce says, oh yeah, go back and hit the Green Lantern again, and just knocks him loopy a second time, and probably gives him a concussion or whatever. But the point is that kid can take you out with one thought, so you can't let him think. And that's the kind of thing that Bruce would think of, He's
playing chess with the future Justice League.
That's right. That's the immediate threat, the most important, the biggest threat. Take that out first, then deal with the other kids, God.
So Batman. So very, very Batman. So as a bit of a wind down, the last thing I'll ask about the Justice League Beyond story within Industrial Revolution, did DC ask for this, or was this, did DC ask for a Justice League Beyond story, or was this your idea?
DC asked for it.
Okay.
They asked if we could include those characters as a way of
I think you might have mentioned this. I'm sorry.
No, I don't know if I did, but
okay.
As a way to widen the universe in case they wanted to start more books featuring Beyond Universe characters.
Oh, that's smart.
Yeah, for sure.
Again, limitation breeds creativity.
Right.
Cool. So we might then see, are we going to start seeing like Barda books? And
Well, I don't know. I mean, again, this book was a number of years ago now. This is almost 10 years ago.
Oh, right.
So they did for a while, we did a split book where there was a Justice League Beyond story and a Batman Beyond story in each issue. And then that continued digitally as well. So there were some stories of those characters told. There was a Superman Beyond story that was going on for a while.
What? Nice.
I don't know what Dan Jurgens and Bernard Chang have planned, and I haven't really been following their book as closely as I should have.
It is so good.
Oh, I bet. So I don't know if they've brought in some of those characters. They may have, and DC may have bigger plans for those as they go along. I don't know. I hope so.
Yeah, me too. I mean, they have brought their kind of mission right now, and what they've done, especially with the most recent issues, is brought it into like the Rebirth continuity.
Mm-hmm.
So that's pretty cool, because now it's like they can truly play with, not like you couldn't before, but I think that now that because Rebirth was as recent as it was, like they're able to kind of just, and with the whole time travel thing that they're doing with Rebirth, like the whole Flashpoint thing, I'm really hoping that it's like, oh, whoops, we're in Neo Gotham. Oh my God, that would be just amazing.
See, I actually kind of avoided that throughout my run, and probably frustrated DC some, because I was really reluctant to set things in stone as far as where the DC universe would be headed. And I know that there were lots of alternate futures and alternate worlds and all that stuff. I didn't really want to get our characters involved in that.
Oh, right, because you would have been part of the New 52 if you wanted to, right?
Could have, I suppose, yeah.
Right.
And there were times when I was asked to cross over more than I did. And when I would cross over, I would try and do it in a way that was kind of almost vague, like this didn't necessarily happen because of this thing that was canonical in DC's past in 1995 or whatever.
Okay.
I wanted sort of it to be separate, but still hint at its connection to the greater DC universe without establishing specific rules for how it was connected, if that makes sense.
Got it.
It just seemed like it would give us both more freedom.
Yeah. Yeah, that's interesting, especially when you're with a property like Beyond, which kind of the point of it is to keep it. The point of it is that it's Beyond. It's not
right.
Part of. If it's Batman part of, it would just be called Batman something else.
Right, exactly.
So that's a very good point.
Thank you.
If you wouldn't mind, or sorry, I guess the last thing we could say is, was there anything else that you wanted to add about? You know what we didn't talk about this time, real quick? The Dustin Nguyen covers.
Yeah.
And the Darwin Cook stuff. If we could just talk a little bit. So Darwin Cook, in case you're not familiar, is and was, unfortunately, he died a few years ago, a legend at DC, had a very distinct style, most well known for Justice League New Frontier, which is a comic, and then later adapted by Bruce Timm and the brilliant people at DC Animation to a great animated movie. One of my favorites. Not all of them necessarily adapt well. That one, they put a lot of work into it and did really well with it. Darwin Cook, speaking of Batman Beyond, also directed and did a lot of the animation for a lot of the art for the intro to the show, the original show from 99 to 2001. And then what brings us to Darwin today is that he did, I think, one variant cover, am I correct, for Industrial Revolution? I
think that's right, yeah. I think for maybe the first issue.
Oh, that was for the first issue?
I think so. Or it may have been, I'm not sure if it was a variant cover or if it was a cover for a second printing. But regardless, he did a cover, and we were really lucky to have it. I never met Darwin, was certainly a fan of his work, both in animation and in comics. And the fact that DC asked him to draw a cover for the book, was really exciting for a lot of reasons. One is because it's exciting to have your name associated with a talent like Darwin's. And another is because it shows that DC has some interest in really promoting and pushing, pushing the book and making it popular. So they're going to assign popular artists to be involved with it somehow. And so both Dustin and Darwin, I think, were really a large part of the book's success because their covers just jumped off the stands at people and made them want to check out our book and try it out.
Yeah, comics are a world in which you judge a book by its cover. Am I correct?
You're so right. You're so right.
I'm sure I'm not the first person to say that either. Dustin, so Darwin's cover is this kind of rogues gallery of Beyond. Absolutely stunning, like I said before. And then Dustin just does these covers that, specifically the Matter Master one, was, for me, I stared at that thing for an inordinate amount of time. It was like I got lost in that cover.
Now, Dustin's a genius. And he knows what makes a cover work, and he knows what's going to catch your eye. And he did issue-specific covers for our run, whereas Darwin's cover, I have a feeling, was commissioned by an editor for being used whenever they would need it, you know?
It seems a more general Beyond, right?
That's exactly right. And I'm sure that's how Darwin approached it, because I don't think he knew what was happening in any given issue necessarily. But Dustin would. He would read the scripts, and then he would do a cover based on what was going to be in that issue. And he never failed to never disappointed. Excuse me, not never failed to disappoint. He never disappointed. His work is amazing. I've got one of his covers, and I, like you, I look at it all the time and just am amazed by it.
Yeah, I mean, it feels like it's immersive. You look at it, and it's everything you want from a comic. It gives you that as close to a cinematic, visual, fluid, just so good. Yeah.
I mean, there's a reason he's as popular as he is. He knows what he's doing.
So where else? I've personally, again, I'm not deep into comics, but where else would I might have seen him, or where else could we find Dustin's work?
Dustin did a book called Lil Gotham, which
I've heard of Lil Gotham,
yeah, and which is adorable and brilliant. And I would highly recommend checking that out when you get a chance. He also worked on the Justice League Beyond comic series that ran concurrently with Batman Beyond. That's worth seeking out, and he's done tons of work for a lot of different publishers. I first got to see his stuff on a lot of Wildstorm stuff back in the 90s. So he's been around and done a lot.
So there's more Batman Beyond stuff for us to look for from Dustin.
Well, yeah, his covers throughout all of our run, and then his Justice League Beyond stuff that he did a number of years ago, too.
And he drew that stuff or did covers?
He drew it and co-wrote it.
Whoa. Oh, and he wrote it. He's a writer.
Co-wrote it, yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
Cool. I did not know that.
Yep. Talented dude.
So, yeah, clearly. Was there anything else you wanted to say about the book or anything else? Beyond related?
Just that it was a privilege to fool around in that universe and be part of developing a corner of Batman that maybe wasn't as developed as a Bruce Wayne with 70 years of history. There was still room to come up with new concepts and new ideas in the Terry McGinnis universe, and it was fun to be allowed to add to that stuff because the way that world was set up by Bruce Timm and Paul Dini and Alan Burnett, Darwin Cook, and James Tucker, and all those people who worked on it, the chance to build on that world that was already so great and in place, it's a privilege. You know what I mean? To know that you're part of that kind of history is really fun, and it's what you hope for when you're a kid reading comics, that you get a chance to play in that sandbox.
You're working with the crown jewels.
One of them for sure.
Would you participate in our send-off, if you don't mind?
Sure.
It's pretty simple. All you have to do is just say, "This is Adam Beechen telling you to go above and Batman Beyond."
Okay.
And you can start whenever.
All right. This is Adam Beechen telling you to go above and Batman Beyond.
Oh, thank you, sir.
Will that work?
Yeah, that was perfect. Thank you.
Okay, right on.
Again, that was part 2 of my interview with TV and comics writer Adam Beechen about his Industrial Revolution comic over at DEC. If you're a comics nerd and you're looking forward to more Batman Beyond comic episodes, they are coming. We have Season 2 of Above and Batman Beyond coming. I decided that the 15 episode mark, which will be 3 episodes from now, this is episode 12, I decided that at episode 15 we'll start a second season, which is approximately 6 months of time, so I was thinking that might be a good season increment. We'll do every 6 months or every 15 episodes. Either way, we're going to have a lot more video coming, but again, if you're a comics nerd, we do have today's guest, Adam Beechen. He is going to come back. Beechen returns. He agreed to come back to talk about other books, including Hush Beyond that he wrote. We also have Bernard Chang said he'd be willing to come back. He's now writing he's now drawing Nightwing for DC. He's no longer on Batman Beyond, but there is some stuff there are some issues that we haven't talked about that were after his interview that he said that he would be willing to come back and talk about. And we have other guests as well. Also, be sure to stay tuned for part 2 of my interview with DC Collectibles toy photographer Tyler from @BatmanFigs on Instagram. That's @BatmanFigs on Instagram. And of course, Happy New Year from Above and Batman Beyond. And that is it for the show. Thanks so much for listening. Once again, please help us out on Patreon if you want to support the show. Just go to patreon.com/BatmanBeyondPodcast to donate. So even if it's only a single dollar, any help at all is much appreciated, and more episodes are coming. If you haven't already, please subscribe to the show on iTunes and give us a quick 5-star review. Just search for Above and Batman Beyond in your podcast app and tap Reviews. It really only takes a few seconds, and then those little stars go a long way to helping us keep the show going. 5-star reviews allow us to continue bringing you all this rich Batman Beyond coverage, interviews with creators in the business of Batman Beyond, other special guests, and writers like me. Especially because we are a new show, I did want to emphasize to our listeners the importance of 5-star reviews. Beside iTunes, Above and Batman Beyond is also available for your listening pleasure on SoundCloud, as well as our very own podcast website, BatmanBeyondPodcast.com. If you like what you heard today in audio form, you can also find my writing at comicbookintl.com. On both Twitter and Instagram, find me at comicbookintl, and my name once again is Benjamin David. Please be sure to check out our Geek News General podcast. Geek News General was our first podcast here on comicbookintl.com, so this officially makes our website a podcast network. That is right, not just one, but 2 Batman-related podcasts under our utility belt. You can find Geek News General on iTunes, SoundCloud, Podbean, and geeknewsbatchnews.com. And of course here at comicbookintl.com, along with the show you're listening to now. Geek News General is a proud member of the Batman Podcast Network. We're thrilled and honored to be part of this awesome Bat Network of podcasts, so here's a shout out of huge thanks to BPN, the Batman Podcast Network. Go to BatmanPodcastNetwork.com to find our show, as well as more than 20 others, all talking about the Bat. Thanks once again to you, BPN, for bringing us into your audio Batman network. As always, if you want to send us any questions or comments and would like us to read them on the show, please hit us up on Twitter and Instagram at comicbookintl, or send us an email, batmanbeyondpod@gmail.com. That's batmanbeyondpod@gmail.com. We'd love to read your messages on the show. Above and Batman Beyond is not an official production of DC Comics, Warner Brothers, Batman Beyond, or any other company, property, and/or license mentioned on this recording, on comicbookintl.com, or on batmanbeyondpodcast.com. The thoughts and opinions shared by the participants of this podcast are theirs and theirs alone, and therefore do not represent the companies or organizations that they happen to work for.